Risk in work. An autoethnographic analysation of my time and relationship with criteria and interest in work while in education. 1. Safe work is always boring work. 2. When risk is supported and encouraged, the best work is created. 3. The act of spending time in a place/space of safety within work will inevitably lead to safe work. Safe work is always boring work. Safety comes in many forms. The first I want to think about is nature. When a human is in nature, a more primal part of them is accessed, often a calmer side. In this state, an artist has an abundance of time to reflect and think. A pretty place is not the place for me. It leaves you to speculate on the beauty of the world that we live, rather than addressing the deep problems that we face. I found myself constantly scrambling to be more political and to make political work and to do something. The turquoise will always remain with you. Dawn French, my graduation. This is in reference to my time at Falmouth University. While at the art school, I had time to calm, relax, and rest. Rejuvenation. The turquoise of the sea will always remain in me, in the fondest of memories. On the other hand, the institution was nothing like what I had experienced. While interest in work was being created to a degree, an obsession with paint and material craft was prevalent within the school. This happened because the environment and the atmosphere was completely visual. We stare longingly at the sea and at the flora, constantly wanting to be in it and around it. We access that more primal instinct to calm and relax, to become voyeur. The voyeur does not interact or affect. The voyeur sits and longs. To be the voyeur is a selfish act. They are the only ones to benefit from their own existence. The modern artist cannot just be the voyeur. How can you be political if you're in the arse end of the country? The modern institution cannot be blamed for the accidents of its surroundings, while it can be blamed for its inaction when combating what it can control. We seek voyeurship as a protective strategy when we do not feel safety within our lives. This is when art is used as a form of escape, not as a form of practical change. When artists are faced with theoretical criteria that no longer make sense to them, they will default back to what they know, not what they predict. They know how to watch, not how to impact. This is not the fault of the individual students, but the system that teaches them. Four, when we remove risk in the form of external factors pressing in on the artist, they have the opportunity to inject that risk into the work they create. Modern educational criteria has not changed and adapted to a new way of thinking. Basic ideas of imagination and creativity, basic research, do not lend themselves to a flexible, changing world. To hustle, to have the courage and confidence, self-belief and determination to go out there and work at it till you find the opportunities you want in life. Or hustle, a slang term for making money, also used in side hustle. It is commonplace for modern workers to have several jobs and or side jobs, moving through fields and applying cross-disciplinary skills to established practices. My mother is a business lecturer / dressmaker. My friend is a construction worker / furniture designer. The modern landscape demands we are changeable and adaptable, but we do not expect this of our art students. In altering criteria to be more flexible, then students could alter it to suit their needs. A better, more extreme approach would be the removal of criteria altogether. My first year of study, I was after the best grade possible, constantly asking like a child, what do I need for a first? That year I achieved a 69 in all of my assignments. My second year of study, I quite literally said fuck it. I drank too much, had Baileys in my coffee in the morning, and stayed up till the early hours. I still put a lot of time into my studies, but in a shifting state between hungover and tipsy. That year was the first time in my life I had achieved a first, and I continued that constantly throughout the year. The lesson to take away is not that alcohol and self-loathing make good work, but those who are self-loathing and have alcoholic tendencies tend to not care what people think of them. In that position, you create work that is not for a grade or to be good, and therefore you remove the criteria yourself and create better and more interesting work. This proves that the standard criteria and/or curriculum do not produce the best working environment. What we can take away from this is if we provide a structure and a framework for risk and danger in work, more risky and dangerous work will be created. This could not be the case if students have a fear of criteria to succeed and study. Currently in foundation education, there are boxes that need ticking. These boxes, by mere existence of being boxes, breaks any chance at making truly creative and imaginative work, never actually ticking the box. I have a group of 3 students. They are the most open to new information and new ways of working. Their practices have benefited most from my interjection in the course. One working in textiles, the other multidisciplinary draftswoman, and the third a performance artist. They are creating some of the most interesting work I've witnessed in the past few years. None of them are going to study art at a BA level. 5. If an artist is constantly thinking about risk in their own life, they will inevitably make work about their own existence. This work, more often than not, is safe work. Safe work is boring work. 6. It is possible to create interesting self-indulgent work, but if one wishes to maximise the possibility of interesting work, they should look for something outside of their own life and experiences. This is only possible if risk in their life is taken away from them. The fundamental difference between the rural and the city is not the existence of flora and fauna. London Zoo is not rural. The Eden Project is not rural. The difference is the type of space. The rural is a space unowned, a place where rejuvenation can take place. The city will always be private. Currently, as we stand in these public spaces within cities, we are reminded that these spaces are simply set aside for the public, not owned by the public. These spaces do not provide comfort, rest, or relaxation. They only provide the opportunity to take them back. It's work, it's receipts, it's city, it's buildings, it's old jobs, and more receipts. It's weird architecture, but all city, all work, all grind. This fundamental feeling to wrench the public space from privatisation has often been made to look like disobedience, graffiti, buskers and protest. But recently, as privatisation is running more rampant, the feeling of needing to take back these spaces is becoming more common and less extreme than once thought. This opens up the idea of space and place, private and public, to art students. It is not uncommon to hear students complaining about the art markets and traditional art spaces, but they are not regularly shown the alternative. During my studies at a formal art institution, I experienced no teaching around ideas of social engagement or relational aesthetics. It does simply not exist in the curriculum and in the criteria. 7. When an artist is working in a pre-constructed institution, they must press themselves up against every wall of it and attempt to break it. If they do not do this, then their work can only reflect the work that has come before it. Reflections, like portraits, are often boring. Boring work is safe work. When thinking about early years teaching, it is easy to see how the banking principle laid out in Pedagogy of the Oppressed is damaging to students' basic understanding of education. But this simple principle can be transposed onto the art school. If curriculum as well as criteria of a course cannot change with the students, then inevitably similar work will be created. Curriculum and criteria that is not changeable and flexible is fundamentally oppressive. While there is scope within art education to explore a certain field of study, the way in which art is marked as a fundamentally oppressive and halts the creative process. Currently, the only truly successful art students are the ones that break the flow of teaching and direct it themselves. But if along with successful move of criteria, the curriculum itself is in a state of flux, then the students will be forced to invest in the direction of their education. 8. Alternatively, an artist can build an institution, a new way of working that facilitates themselves and practices like theirs. Then, the need to push against the institution is voided, allowing more energy to put into risk-taking. 9. An artist can only experience risk in one area of life at a present time. If they're experiencing risk in multiple directions, they will be pulled back into themselves. At best, they will create self-indulgent art. More likely, they will just decorate galleries. Currently, I am pondering this in the peak of the coronavirus. I'm witnessing every day people turn into musicians, artists, and craftspeople. The dormant artists are breathing life into their practices. This is the perfect example of what I have laid out above. Due to those on furlough schemes or working from home, they have entered into a risk-free state. They have an income and they have time. In this gap, creativity runs rampant. This is akin to art education. If students were told you will pass no matter what, only if you turn up, nothing is wrong, everything is valid, then imagine the work that would be created. Clothing brands, bands, soup kitchens, podcasts. These are all valid practices for the artist post-graduation, but during degrees they are pressed into a form that only allows for visual work. Imagine the difference. What weird and brilliant work that our artists could be doing. Art is changing in a fundamental way. During this pandemic and in the current climate, art is more important than it's ever been. Capitalism is embedded, and it is hard to see past or through it. But now some are starting to see the cracks. People are putting their own safety above profit. And it is now that we need to throw away the traditional Bauhaus modes of thinking and doing and evaluate what art can and should be for a society that is moving at a pace that has never been seen before. 10. Boring work is safe. Safe work is boring. Boring work does nothing for anyone.